They said it was impossible. 6 players gone, facing the defending champs on MVP night in Vegas. The Indiana Fever weren't just underdogs, they were written off. But one fearless night flipped the script. This wasn't just an upset, it was a warning. And the basketball world is still stunned. They said the Indiana Fever was done before the series even started. Analysts on ESPN penned them off. Oddsmakers put the Aces as heavy favorite. Fans shrugged their shoulders. How could a team missing 6 players even survive, let alone threaten a powerhouse like Las Vegas? This was no ordinary deficit. The Fever came into the semifinals with injuries to Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham, Sydney Colson, Ari McDonald, and Chloe Bibby, all sidelined. Key pieces, game changers. Meanwhile, the Aces entered roaring, a dominant regular season. A'ja Wilson freshly crowned a record-setting 4th MVP, their full-strength home court. Indiana hadn't made the semis in a decade. It felt impossible. But sometimes in sports, when the odds are stacked, that's when belief kicks in, when adversity becomes fuel. And on Sunday, September 21st, 2025, what happened next shocked everyone. Las Vegas, home crowd roaring. Banner nights, lights, cameras. The setting was perfect for a celebration. A'ja Wilson was honored pregame. Eyes on her? MVP speech tucked in. Champions signaling that this night belonged to them. On the other side, Indiana limped in. Injuries, uncertainty, whispered questions. Would they collapse? Would their lack of depth show? Caitlin Clark, the face of their future, was on the sideline with a right groin injury. Other starters out, but something about that hospital squad energy felt raw, alive. They walked out in their black Air Force Ones. It wasn't glamour, but grit. The fans expected a coronation. Analysts predicted a sweep. Headlines spoke of survival for the Fever, not victory. This was supposed to be Wilson's night, the MVP celebration. The confetti in the air, the narrative already written. But in the deafening expectation, there was tension. Like before a storm breaks, Kelsey Mitchell was the spark. A regular season average of about 20.2 points per game had made her one of the league's deadliest scorers. But in this semifinal debut, her first at this stage, she exploded. 34 points, playoff career high. Shot 12 of 23 from the field, 52, 9 feet, 2%, 4 of 6 from 3. She carried them. She scored 17 in the first half, 17 in the second. Her aggressiveness wasn't just scoring, it was leadership, belief personified. Aliyah Boston took on her own fight. Guarding A'ja Wilson, the MVP, no small task. Wilson finished with a double-double, 16 PTs, 13 rebounds, but she was far from dominant. She missed her first 6 field goals. She was uncomfortable. Why? Because Boston was in her face every time. Boston frustrated her, contested, made her earn every inch. Boston didn't get the flashiest numbers, but her defense set the tone. Lexi Hull stepped into moments no one thought she would matter in. On Jackie Young, one of the league's premier scorers, Hull played smothering defense, scraps, screens, cuts, and when Indiana needed threes, Hull delivered. Quiet but sharp, Odyssey Sims, veteran, took over when the game sped up. She attacked, penetrated, forced Las Vegas defenders to collapse and rotate, created pockets for Indiana. Her drives shifted the tempo. They were not waiting for the Aces to set the flow. The Fever forced it. Natasha Howard and Brianna Turner anchored the paint. Howard with rebounds, with toughness, with physicality. Turner altering shots, protecting the rim. The Aces expected to bully inside. They were met with resistance. Indiana won the paint by a margin that surprised almost everyone. Full stat. Indiana outscored Las Vegas 50-38 in points in the paint. Together, this cast, injured, underdog, overlooked, refused to be background. Their stories intertwined. Mitchell's growth, Boston's rise, Hull's hustle, Sims's pace change, Howard, Turner's defense. Grit over glamour, heart over odds. First quarter, the Fever opened with energy. Mitchell got in early, made shots, establishing tone. They didn't wait for the Aces to unravel, they pushed. Indiana led, Even though Aces had the home crowd, the accolades, the momentum, the narrative didn't even feel settled yet. But Indiana made sure the crowd felt uneasy. Second quarter, discipline. The Fever's defense began to lock in. Aces looked for Wilson in post, in pick and rolls. Those attempts were made hard. Wilson missed 6 straight early, forced to work late in possessions. Meanwhile, Indiana, through Sims, Mitchell, and Boston, made the extra pass, took the mid-range shot, and hit open threes. Odysseus Sims and Natasha Howard chipped in. By halftime, Indiana's confidence had grown. Third quarter, Vegas tried to claw back. Runs, pushes. They made it tight. But Indiana responded, not just with baskets, but composure. After the Aces cut the lead down, Indiana went on an 11-0 run to silence the crowd and re-establish control, ending the quarter strong. Mitchell kept scoring. Boston kept defending. The edge stretched. Fourth quarter. This was Mitchell's moment. She buried a three-pointer with 1:23 left to push Indiana ahead, 87-71. The dagger. The crowd gasped. The Fever seemed to steal not just the win, but the narrative. They closed the game 89-73. The Aces looked stunned. Fact, Vegas was held to 73 points, their home court potency blunted. Indiana shot 50% from the field, 34 of 68, while Vegas shot around 40.8%, a considerable efficiency gap. Key stats. Recap. Mitchell's 34, record for most points in first career semifinal game. Fever outscored in paint, 50-38. Shooting splits. Indiana, 32 22 38. 50% FG versus Las Vegas, 40. Aja Wilson, struggle, 16 points, 13 rebounds, but 6 of 22 FG. Through each quarter, the script flipped. Home advantage, MVP honors, pre-game predictions, all faded. Indiana's performance wasn't perfect, but their collective resolve outmatched expectation. Becky Hammon, normally steady and poised, admitted after the game, "We had no answer for Mitchell." The simplicity of that line cut deep. When your opponent is respected, but you're still unprepared, that's a failure of anticipation. Vegas had strength, depth, and a home crowd, but Indiana exploited mismatches, momentum, and mindset. Caitlin Clark, even from the sideline, sent a message. A 2-word shout-out that spread, "Kelsey, unreal." No overstatement, no hype, just respect. And in those 2 words, she acknowledged that something special had happened. Mitchell reflected, quietly, but with emotion. This wasn't just scoring points. It was years of being overlooked, of expectations deferred. She talked about growth, about seeing what it's like at the bottom of the barrel, about being unnoticed, about the moments she could have quit, but she didn't. Her father's influence, her persistence, they all showing up on this stage. She said this game wasn't just for her, but for teammates who've believed, even when few others did. Coach Stephanie White pointed beyond one star. She spoke of identity. "We over me." She celebrated the layers. The way each player, starter or reserve, contributed. Defense, hustle, communication. She stressed that regardless of who's wearing the uniform, what matters is the standard. That belief embodied the win. Analysts are still recalculating. Sports media that pegged Indiana as lucky to be here are now admitting this feels earned. Headlines changed. Fever stun Aces. Mitchell steals night. The narrative has shifted. Data points. Vegas had won 16 straight before this loss at home. Wilson had swept MVP voting. The Aces' offense had been among the most efficient league-wide. And yet, the Fever's suppleness, their readiness, turned expectation into pressure, and pressure into a win. This wasn't just a game. It was a statement, a symbol, a reminder that in sports and in life, the script is never set until the final buzzer sounds. To beat a reigning champion is one thing, but to beat her on her MVP night, in her own building, surrounded by the noise of her crown and the comfort of her crowd, that's something different. It was more than basketball. It was defiance. Indiana didn't come into Las Vegas asking for sympathy because of injuries or excuses because of their lack of depth. They came to demand respect. For the Fever, this was the first semifinal win in nearly a decade. Since 2015, fans have been waiting, watching season after season of struggle, roster shuffles, and painful rebuilds. They weren't supposed to be here. They weren't supposed to compete. But that's why this victory resonates so deeply. It matters not only in the record books, but in the very DNA of the franchise. It was a rewriting of their identity, a reminder that legacy doesn't have to follow expectation. Think about the great upsets in sports history. The Miracle on Ice in 1980, the Cavaliers' comeback in 2016, the countless March Madness Cinderella runs. Each time, an underdog flipped the script, forcing the world to pause and admit, "We didn't see this coming." That's exactly what Indiana did in Game 1. Kelsey Mitchell's 34 points weren't just a scoring outburst. They were a declaration. For years, she's been overshadowed, sometimes overlooked in the national conversation. But on this night, she didn't just step into the spotlight, she owned it. Her performance now joins the lineage of unforgettable playoff nights, the kind of showing that redefines how a player is perceived forever. And then there was Aaliyah Boston. Her defensive work on Aja Wilson wasn't glamorous, but it was monumental. Holding the MVP to just 16 points on 6 of 22 shooting was proof of grit, patience, and strength beyond her years. Boston may not have filled the box score with highlights, but she embodied the defensive greats, players who controlled games not by scoring, but by smothering the best scorer on the floor. Together, Mitchell and Boston gave Indiana more than points or stops. They gave them belief. They gave them a reason to think bigger, to play freer, to understand that underdog is not a prison, but a weapon. And the ripple effects go beyond the locker room. National analysts, once dismissive, now must speak the names of Indiana's stars with respect. Fans who doubted are finding themselves fired up. And opponents now know this Fever team is no longer just a storyline. They are a problem. Momentum has shifted. Public perception has tilted. And the Fever, long an afterthought in the playoff picture, have forced themselves into the center of the conversation. This upset wasn't just about one game. It was about rewriting what's possible, about proving that when heart meets opportunity, even the biggest giants can fall. If you felt the shock, if you felt the fire, then let the world know. Drop a comment below, share this story with your fellow fans, and don't forget to subscribe for more breakdowns of the moments that changed the game. Because the Fever just reminded us, underdogs don't just dream, they conquer. One win down, but the job is far from finished. The Fever's Game 1 miracle gave them the lead, but in playoff basketball, momentum is fragile. The statistics tell a powerful story. In WNBA best-of-5 semifinal series, teams that lose Game 1 only come back to win the series about 28% of the time. Indiana now holds the edge, but that edge will vanish quickly if they let the defending champions settle back into rhythm. For the Las Vegas Aces, Game 2 becomes a matter of pride. Expect adjustments and expect them fast. Becky Hammon knows her team has too much firepower to score just 73 points again. Their first tweak will likely be centered around Aja Wilson. Indiana successfully frustrated her into an uncharacteristic 6 of 22 shooting night. That won't sit well with the MVP. Look for Vegas to get her touches earlier in possessions, run more isolation sets, and force Boston into foul trouble. If Wilson starts hot, Indiana's defense could bend under the pressure. But Wilson isn't the only key. The Fever's defensive schemes clogged up lanes and forced Jackie Young and Chelsea Gray into contested shots. Las Vegas must loosen Indiana's perimeter defense. Better spacing, quicker ball rotation, maybe even smaller lineups that can run the floor. If Young finds her rhythm from deep, if Gray orchestrates with her usual poise, Indiana's defense will have to scramble in ways it didn't in Game 1. On the other side, Indiana faces its own set of questions. Can Kelsey Mitchell do it again? 34 points in a semifinal debut is legendary, but now she'll carry a target on her back. Vegas will throw traps, doubles, physical defense. Mitchell will need to adapt, and her teammates must create space. This is where veterans like Odyssey Sims and role players like Lexi Hull come in. Their confidence from Game 1 has to carry over. Then there's the battle inside. Aaliyah Boston was fearless against Wilson. But can she continue to defend without fouling while still contributing on offense? The Aces will test her conditioning, drag her into screens, and try to wear her down. Depth could also swing this series. Indiana is short-handed, 6 players injured, rotations tightened. Fatigue becomes a silent opponent in playoff basketball. Every possession matters. Can the Fever bench give just enough minutes of energy to keep the starters fresh? That's the difference between a competitive Game 2 and a runaway Aces response. The stakes are crystal clear. If Indiana steals Game 2, they don't just hold momentum, they seize control. A 2-0 lead against the defending champions turns whispers of an upset into belief in a finals run. But if Las Vegas answers back, order is restored, and Indiana's Game 1 win risks being remembered as a fluke rather than a shift in power. This isn't just basketball. It's about belief, resilience, and rewriting narratives. Game 2 will test whether Indiana can truly stand with the league's elite, or whether the Aces reclaim the throne they've guarded for years. If you believe in the Fever, if you think they can shock the world again, drop a "fired up" in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, share it with a fellow fan, and subscribe for more playoff stories that bring the emotion, the drama, and the history of the game straight to you. The story isn't finished, and you won't want to miss what happens next. From invisible to unstoppable. That's the story of this night. For months, the Indiana Fever were dismissed, doubted, and overlooked. To many, their playoff berth was nothing more than a cameo appearance, a chance to say, at least they made it this far. But on this night in Las Vegas, they proved that destiny doesn't wait for permission. It demands respect. What began as a game destined to be A'ja Wilson's coronation turned into Kelsey Mitchell's masterpiece. The spotlight shifted, the narrative bent. What many expected to be a routine victory for the reigning champions became something far greater, a statement. And not just for the scoreboard, but for every player in that locker room, for every fan who never stopped believing, and for a franchise that has waited 10 long years to taste playoff glory again. Think about it. The Fever were missing key players, written off by analysts, laughed at by oddsmakers, and underestimated by nearly everyone outside of Indiana. Yet, they walked into the Lions' den, into the Aces' fortress, and left with history in their hand. This wasn't supposed to happen, but that's what makes it unforgettable. Moments like these live forever because they remind us that sports are not scripted. They're raw. They're real. They're unpredictable. You can crown an MVP, you can raise the banner, you can flood the airwaves with predictions, but until the ball is tipped, until the game is played, you don't know whose heart will rise to the occasion. And on this night, Indiana's heart was bigger, stronger, louder. Kelsey Mitchell's 34 points were more than numbers on a stat sheet. They were years of perseverance condensed into one performance. Aaliyah Boston's defensive grit wasn't just about holding Wilson to 16. It was about sending a message. We belong here. Sims, Hull, Howard, Turner, each of them stamped their names on the story. Together, they reminded the world that underdogs bite hardest when no one sees them coming. And now, the Fever aren't just passengers in the playoffs. They're drivers, steering their own destiny, rewriting what everyone thought they knew. They aren't asking for respect anymore. They're taking it. So what happens next? That's the question. Can they follow this with another miracle in Game 2? Can Mitchell keep carrying the torch? Can Boston frustrate Wilson again? The answers are ahead of us, and that's the beauty of it. The journey isn't finished. It's only just beginning. For the first time in a decade, Indiana Fever basketball feels alive, electric, undeniable. They've turned doubt into belief. They've turned adversity into strength. And they've turned one night into a symbol of what's possible when a team refuses to fold. If you felt that fire tonight, if you believe in this team's fight, drop a comment right now and type "fired up." Smash that like button. Share this video with every Fever fan, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because this isn't luck. This is grit. This is history. This is now.